Stream going now. Oh, hey, Don.
Yeah, what's up?
Okay, so we got the live stream going now, and we're going to call the order shortly here.
Okay.
All right, you got 7:30, Takara? Okay, so it's 7:30. I'm going to call this meeting of the Public Safety Committee to order. I'll start with the affidavit of posting. This agenda was posted in the office of the county clerk on the 8th day of September, 2021. Notice was sent to the West Bend Daily News, Express News, WIBD, WMBZ Radio, WTKM Radio, My Community Now, Hartford Times Press, Kewaskum Statesman, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Okay, for roll call, everybody is here except for Supervisor Gannering. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so our first thing is the consent agenda. I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Okay, motion by Supervisor Marquardt, second. Okay, second by Supervisor Berg. If you tried to second Supervisor Milliken, sorry if I didn't hear you. Okay, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Okay, and the motion carries unanimously. Our next agenda item is the department budgets. So I believe we're going to turn it over to Aaron for that.
Good morning, everyone. So I wanted to start all of these meetings with just a quick little process update of where we're at in the budget process overall. So in April, we were developing assumptions and on big ticket type items, wages, benefits, big global assumptions, revenue sources, things like that. Moving in, that took us into June when we started training departments. We had a new system this year. We issued tax levy targets. And for those of you that don't know, tax levy targets are essentially a tax levy amount that we assign to each department when we start the budget process. We try to get them to hit that amount. That way, we only assign out what we know we have to work with. And so if people hit all those targets, then we kind of land the budget where it needs to be right off the bat. And that's really helpful. So it's something we've been doing for a number of years. Moving into July, departments then took and entered their budgets into the system. And then in August, we did a round of presentations by the departments to essentially to the county executive, but at those meetings, we had the standing committee chairs at all of the meetings for the departments that they sort of oversee, so that they could listen to the budgets, they could give input, ask questions, things like that. So we found that to be pretty helpful over the last couple of years. So now the standing committees are getting a first look at the county executive's budget. The full budget will then go to the executive committee for the public hearing that's on the 20th of October. And then it goes to the county board at the November 10th meeting for consideration and adoption. So in terms of these meetings specifically, we're going to run them similar to prior years, where we'll address the budgets as they're shown in the packet. We'll do them in order. I'll sort of talk about the significant items in there. Certainly give the department heads a chance to speak on them as well. If they have anything to add, they're here to answer questions. But for the most part, we are going to, move through them, not focusing on small dollar amounts or things like that, but certainly stop me if you've got any questions and we can answer those. So just generally about the packet, each department has a number of one or more financial tables with all the budget info. We kind of group those costs and revenues into manageable groupings so we can sort of understand what's happening, right? Like personnel costs and interdepartmental things like that. We've also included some narrative on some of the big dollar changes that are in there. There's some narrative on some of the goals and the highlights that departments have, things that are funded, initiatives that may be funded in this budget, different things like that. And then finally, after the financial tables themselves, we've got for some departments where it's applicable, they've got their fee schedules, their capital outlay requests, capital outlay being some of the large ticket items over $5,000. That's different from a capital, that's different from the CIP, but we do ask that they identify some large ticket items in the capital outlay section. So jumping into the budget packet itself, you'll see we've got, we start with what we call functional area grouping. So it's just summary information that sort of just groups together all of the departments under the jurisdiction of the Public Safety Committee. And then we start into the department budgets themselves. So one thing Josh wanted me to mention, as we're considering all of these individual department budgets, Josh wanted you to keep in mind that the overall budget that you'll see in October is going to show $1 million levy cut across the biennium. So while you'll see increases and decreases in these different departments, overall, that's where we're going to land. So I'll just get started with the Clerk of Courts budget. One thing to take one step back, one thing you'll hear me mention a couple of times throughout this is cost to continue budget. When I say that, that really just means while you'll see some cost increases and things like personnel, really it's just normal merit and COLA pay increases, normal contract type increases, just general things, just general increases in the cost of doing business. And really there's not a lot to talk about there. So when I say cost to continue, that's what I mean. But as I said, I'll go through each of these budgets and note some of the major items here. So starting with the Clerk of Courts, this budget, there's some revenue reductions here. If you sort of track the tax levy line, so the department total tax levy impact across the bottom, you'll see it sort of bounces from like 1.3 million to 1.4 million. And 2021 sort of stands out as an anomaly at $1.15 million in tax levy. So that sort of represents that we needed to reduce revenues to get those in line with historical actuals. So there's a revenue adjustment here. It's essentially to get us where we think we're going to be moving into the future. So that's the story on the revenue side of it. Specifically, those were some of the reimbursement revenues we get when the court appoints attorneys and guardians ad litem and things like that. There are some personnel cost increases. Some of that is cost to continue, but we did have some folks switch from family insurance to no insurance at all from single insurance, to no insurance at all to a more costly family plan. And so you get 2-3 people doing that, and that can certainly drive some big swings in your personnel cost line. And some of that increase is what we're experiencing there. you'll notice that interdepartmental charges are down about $37,000. A lot of that is related to just sort of an accounting change that happened. We're now recognizing postage in a different category. So about $25,000 or $26,000 shifted from interdepartmental up to materials and supplies. So just really a cost shift, not necessarily a big change, but just something I wanted to point out. Actually, no, I already covered that one. Are there any questions on the clerk of courts budget right now? We've got Teresa and staff here. Teresa, did you have anything to add or? Okay, thank you. So if there are no questions, I'll just move into the next budget.
Yeah, are there any questions on the clerk of courts budget? Okay, just one question going forward. You talked about merit and COLA increases. How much is the COLA increase for 2022 and for 2023? And then what are we looking at for potential merit increases?
Sure. We're planning 2% for a COLA.
For both
So that will increase the pay ranges. You know, we're sort of factoring a number of things in here, CPI and inflation being one of them. So so that's what we're planning for COLA. In terms of merit, we settled on an sort of an average of 2% merit increase. Now we don't necessarily know if that's going to impact every employee that same way. So if you recall our compensation plan, the merit increase that the employee receives is tied to their performance appraisal score. So not everybody's going to get 2%. Some will get above, some will get below. And so we sort of settled on an average, and that's what we built into the budget.
And what's the range that they could get? Is it 0 to 3% or 4%?
That's yet to be determined.
Okay,
We're not fully through that part yet, but we did think that 2% was
A good
a
average.
conservative way to budget for this. So
okay, all right. And then on the clerk of courts, I think it was the receivables where there was a question of how to budget with the changes, whether or not to budget aggressively for them or to budget a little bit and then over time let the budget adjust. Which approach was finally settled on there?
We did not change anything from where she originally came in. We sat down again after the meeting and sort of looked at all the numbers again, and the trends were where were to the point where we were not comfortable being too aggressive on those revenues.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Sure.
Supervisor Marquardt?
Noticing that revenue and collection of court-ordered reimbursements is one area of decrease on the revenue side. I know we supported a few resolutions for changing those fee structures. So if the legislature follows through with some of these recommendations, that might go back up in the future. Is that correct?
Absolutely, that's correct. You know, we've done a lot of work. Teresa has done a lot of good work as well, calculating, you know, estimates and helping out with different lobbying efforts. And we're certainly hopeful that the legislature makes some changes, but we're not banking on it in this budget. So.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on clerk of courts budget? Okay, I think we're good to move forward.
All right, fantastic. So the next one, so after the clerk of courts budget page itself, there you'll see where there's a user fee table, and really that's just FYI. That's just informational. So moving into the district attorney budget, this one is largely a cost to continue budget. With the small exception of health insurance costs. So this phenomenon is actually the opposite direction of what happened in the clerk of courts budget. They had a number of people switch from family to no insurance at all or the single plan, and so that drove some personnel cost savings in that first year of the biennium in 2022. But again, otherwise, there's not a lot of changes here. There's some incremental revenue adjustments. But otherwise not a lot of changes. I didn't have a lot of notes on this one. Any questions or unless the DA Benson wants to speak to this budget? Sure, please.
First of all, I wanted to thank Aaron. Aaron and I worked a little bit with, or quite a bit with the budget, and I'm blessed to have great coworkers like Aaron and within my office to deal with. So thank you very much, Aaron. I really do appreciate your help. And secondly, with regard to, I appreciate the support from the county, our office. I think some of you know this. I say this every time, but it's a unique office within the county because 6.4 of us are paid by the state. Myself and the other attorneys are all paid by the state. And then the staff is all paid by the county. And then we get reimbursed, or victim witness gets reimbursed 40 to 60% of their budget which is 2 people, which can amount to several multiple thousands of dollars by the state. I appreciate the support from the county. We have drug court. I know you were all at the presentation a couple of nights ago when Judge Martin's updated you on the different programs that we have that our office is actively involved in, particularly the drug treatment court, which is new. So I wanted to thank you for your support on drug treatment courts specifically, but overall as well. And obviously, if you have any questions for Aaron and I on the budget, I'm here.
Okay, questions about the district attorney budget? Okay, I think we're good to move on to the next one.
Okay, sounds good. Emergency preparedness, or I'm sorry, emergency management is the next budget. From an operating cost side, this is another cost to continue budget. There are really no changes to report other than some incremental personnel costs. There are some in 2022, some one-time costs that are in this budget. So there's about $98,000 in total of one-time purchases in this budget. There's $53,000 to upgrade the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center. That's funded in the budget with one-time general fund balance. You'll see that in a couple areas throughout the entire budget. That's an approach that we took this year. Rather than levying for one-time items, we're just going to use some of the general fund that's been accumulating to make some of those one-time purchases. We thought that was a good way to do it rather than levying for those costs. So $53,000 for the EOC. And then there are $45,000 in there for a new vehicle for the department. I believe the vehicle was purchased in the early 2000s. It's starting to show signs of age. It's starting to become costly for repair and maintenance on an ongoing basis. So $45,000 of that, 50% is funded with a grant, and the remaining 50% is funded again with the general fund balance. Again, not many changes from an operating side. You'll see those costs come back out in 2023. So an increase and then a reduction, and really there's not much else on this one either. So if there are any questions.
So if he got almost 20 years out of that vehicle, is that a record for longevity for our vehicles?
I'm not sure. I think if you ask the HSD, they've got a few oldies sitting around there too.
Do they? Okay. All right.
My first vehicle, so I don't have a track record. But it helps to, be able to park it inside like that.
Yep. Okay, questions about the emergency management budget? Okay, looks like we're good to go on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to the medical examiner budget. So this budget is mostly, it's mostly people, and then there's the contract with Waukesha County for autopsies and some other services. In terms of the people, again, cost to continue. In terms of the contract itself, you're going to see a larger increase in 2022 than in 2023 because that contract is indexed to CPI. And of course, as we know, with some of the inflationary indicators floating around, CPI is up in this year. So we are anticipating sort of a bigger bump than normal in that contract, but then anticipating it stabilizing into that second year of the biennium. That was really my only notes. We've got Rob here if he's got anything to add, or if you've got any questions, but. Okay.
Okay, questions about the medical examiner budget? Okay, looks like we're good to go on to the sheriff's.
All right.
Thank you.
So this is a big budget. I'll go, there's a number of pages here, so I'll sort of start at the top of the first page and work my way through. There are some, more changes in some areas than in others. So I will note the sections that I'm talking about specifically, and Mr. Sheriff and staff, please interrupt me if you've got anything to add. So starting on this first page, there's administration and some other, training and other cost centers. There's not a lot of change in this first page. You can see that from the financial table itself, but I didn't have any significant notes on this page. So with that, I would move into that second page. Starting with patrol. So patrol revenue is showing an increase. First, in intergovernmental, that increase is for the Richfield contract. Really, that's tied to our personnel costs, right? So when our staff costs go up, that contract, goes up in turn. So that's essentially what that is. The interdepartmental line goes up a little bit as well. That represents a planned increase in the number of transports done for DHSD. When COVID started, they really reduced, if not stopped, a lot of that. And so this revenue adjustment sort of represents a change back to historical levels for 2023. I'm sorry, 22 and 3. In terms of expenditures, so in this patrol area, and then also in special forces, which is the grouping at the very bottom of that second page, you're going to see some cost shifting between those two. Costs coming out of special forces, costs going into patrol. This is largely just the way accounting practices, the way we group things. And so, it's essentially just, when people move from one place to the other, the costs follow them. But overall, so I guess what I'm getting at is that change should be considered holistically between those two rather than, stand alone between patrol and special forces. Another thing to note with all of the personnel costs in those two groupings overall, those costs also increase slightly to reflect the change from the 1 lieutenant to the 2 sergeants. That was approved by the board in August, I believe. And so we certainly folded that into this budget and built those costs in. Moving down to corrections. So corrections revenues were reduced based on historical trends. just historical experience, certainly some consideration for what might be happening going forward, in terms of, there's some telephone revenues in here that some folks in the legislature, there's sort of, a movement there to make that a less lucrative business. And so we're certainly not gunning that budget, but we're not being as optimistic as we could. We're not being optimistic, period, about it because of some of the trends that are going through the different legislatures at this point. So a revenue correction there. Moving into the cost side, this one's a cost to continue budget. There's not a lot of changes with the personnel itself. Purchased services, there is a cost increase there. That increase is largely to reflect expected increases in inmate medical costs. So I mean, the increased costs are here today. And so, this represents a continuation of that trend. So that is reflected in the budget. In the communications section, right below corrections, that you'll see that, there's not a lot of changes there. That is another cost to continue budget. But I did want to point it out because it's one of the bigger budget areas here. And again, the special forces grouping at the bottom should be considered almost hand in hand with the patrol area because they're very much connected. So moving on to the last page, I didn't have a lot to add for courthouse security or for the radio system. There was a revenue adjustment of about $10,000 in radio. That's based on just a contract going away for rental space on the tower. But other than that, that is the operating side of the sheriff's budget. Mr. Sheriff, did you have anything to add? Okay, please.
Thank you very much. So just a couple of comments on our budget. This is the first time that we've eclipsed the $20 million mark in our budget cycles. I don't take that lightly at all. But I don't know if the committee was given our tax levy budget target numbers at all. That was early on in the stages. It was $475,000 increase is what we were trying to hit the target at. And we ended up at like 749,000 over the total instead of 475. So 4,000 over the target number. And much of that is due to personnel costs that are very hard to control. Over 91% of our budget is personnel costs. So that target number that we were given early, and it was early on in the stages. It didn't seem like it was very realistic. So, but as Aaron said, it's we very much balance the wants versus the needs. So our personnel costs, I think, were about almost 700,000 of that. That's that total increase. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, questions about the sheriff's budget? Supervisor Marquardt?
Yes, Sheriff. One thing I noticed was the training budget was actually going down, and I was a little surprised by that. So if you could maybe comment. They're not big numbers, but one would expect that, I think, more training in the future than.
I believe I'd have to look at it closer, but I believe the reason for it going down was the previous year we had budgeted quite a bit of money for the crowd control training for the entire department. So we brought that back down. So we weren't training the entire department on it.
to kind of back to normal
Correct, yeah.
levels. Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions on the sheriff's budget? Okay, I'm just gonna add in one question. I see nothing about the upcoming radio project in the budget. Is that just because that's not approved yet, so we can't really include it in the budget?
It is in the CIP. And you'll see that in the full budget document that goes to the executive committee. We've got one of these budget book pages for the CIP specifically, so the radio project is encompassed in that grouping. And again, the project form itself and the description and all of that is in the CIP information packet that'll be again included in the budget document itself. Since it's still in the project phase, it is a capital project. Once it becomes operational, then you'll start to see those operational costs folded into the operations budget after that point.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions on the sheriff's budget? Okay, and I think we got the special sheriff's budget yet?
That's correct, yes. So that special funds page is where we account for things outside of that operating budget. There's not a lot of action in here other than in the jail assessment fund section. Basically, these funds are collected on the fines that folks pay for citations and things like that. And they're to be used on jail projects. So there's $41,000 in 2022 and $36,000 in 2023. In 22, that is targeted to replace a shower machine, transfer switches, and some kitchen equipment in the jail. And then in 2023, it's to replace some skylights and a washing machine in the jail. So again, targeted use of these funds. Well, it's for just ongoing sort of items, or I'm sorry, not ongoing, more one time, but ongoing maintenance and replacement needs, things like that. So.
Okay, any questions on the special funding budget for the sheriff's department? Okay, seeing none, is there anything you have yet to present on the budget, or is it time to approve it? Or actually, this is just a discussion item, so we don't really approve it.
Right.
Yeah.
I had nothing else on the budget, but if there are any last questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay, I don't see any other questions, so I think we're all set. And that being the only agenda item, our next meeting will be Wednesday, October 20th, 2021 at 7:30 a.m. And I hereby adjourn this meeting.